What's up, you guys? Adam here with Anabolic Climbing, and today we're going to talk about the steroid and collagen synthesis synergy. So, if you guys like these kind of breakdowns into anabolics, peptides, mechanisms of action happening within the tendons, within the muscles, and getting a little bit more into the nitty-gritty and the nerdy stuff of how PEDs impact performance and impact the quality of both your muscle and tendon, hit that like and subscribe, man. Love to have you. Obviously, join the Discord. Check out our partners over at Anabolic Insights. Code CLIMBING for a discount. But yeah, without further ado, let's break down the ways that there are synergies and how there's interplay between anabolics and collagen synthesis. So first off, this image right here is brought to us by our friend ghk-cu. Jake, probably the foremost expert on tendons that I have seen online. I would love to get in contact with him at one point. But his point here is when it comes to injury, we usually put the cart before the horse. In this case, the cart being the tendon and the horse being the muscle. But there's a reason why I like that a lot. In general, you're not able to stimulate the tendon without any sort of muscular engagement. And that's why I have our friend the crane here. So think about it this way, right? When you're trying to pull something up with a crane, you might have the tendon, which would be the cable, doing some of the work, but the cable isn't generating force. The cable's holding force. It's the engine, the muscle, that's ultimately the main force driver in the equation. So what do we mean by that? So you'll see all of the tendons and cartilage that is hanging out down at the bottom of the hands, but it's ultimately going to be the flexor digium superficialis or the flexor digium profundus that is doing most of the heavy lifting that is then engaging and then driving the fingers up. Sure, if there is too much pressure coming out of it, it might end up leading to a pulley injury downstream, or potentially even some higher up injuries, which may be expressed toward the wrist at the bottom end of the tendon. But you're not going to be able to grip without either engagement from the SDS or the FTP. So why do I mention any of this? Well, in order to climb hard or as hard as possible, the strength isn't coming from our tendons. It's coming from our muscles. And that's where the anabolics come into play. Anabolics are going to easily create an increase in stimulus and strength expression in both the FDS and FTP. And that's a thing that is worth considering. Also, it's going to provide additional nutrient delivery, additional growth factors there that might not inherently be expressed further on down the chain. One other thing that I want to mention, and I'm going to hop around here a little bit, muscles can benefit from anabolics alone, whereas tendons cannot without load. If I hang out here and I slam a bunch of testosterone, I am going to have growth into my FDS and my FTP. That's not going to happen to the tendons below. There's some douchebag on Instagram who I believe I've made an IG post about, where all he's doing is taking tren and tests to get bigger. And yeah, the dude's body is recomping. His tendons are not better for it. Tendons ultimately require load in order to get a top or some sort of adaptation. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But one other thing is, as long as you're continually adding additional stimulus, which can come from the anabolics, assuming that you're not creating any overuse injuries, you're going to be able to yield additional benefits to the tendons. Also, the properties that can improve the tendons aren't just increases in collagen synthesis. There are other factors at play that can prime the tendons for prime growth, and we're going to get into that in a bit. But those could be your anti-inflammatory properties or potentially the ability to increase collagen expression through things like the BPC-157 or GH synergy. So let's start going a little bit deeper into the muscles, and then we'll transition a little bit more into the tendons. So obviously I've highlighted some of my favorite compounds here. We have our test, our anavar, our primobolan, our turinabol, and our mastron. And the reason I've chosen them is because A, they're going to increase nutrient absorption. Two, this is one of the things that I think is most overlooked when it comes to steroids, the increased neurological efficiency. So what do I mean by this? When you're learning a new movement, let's say you've never benched before and you start bench pressing, and your bench press starts shooting through the roof. Your muscle isn't growing by leaps and bounds. You're just becoming more efficient at the movement. And testosterone can accelerate this process. Most steroids do. Additionally, some of them will give you a more acute strength increase. While almost all steroids over time will yield increases in strength, some are more potent than others. Primarily your anavar, your turinabol, even primobolan and mastron can give you an acute increase in strength without giving you an acute amount of bloat or water retention like you might see with something like dianabol or anadrol. Next up, you're going to get an increased rate of muscular adaptation. So not only are you going to get acute strength increases in the short term, but your ability to become stronger week to week is going to be increased versus a natural competitor or a natural athlete. You guys know this already intuitively, but I'm just spelling this out a little bit. So sure, your FDP and your FDS are going to get stronger at accelerated rates, but what's more important about this is provided you're not creating any overuse injuries, you're actually going to be creating additional stimulus or load for your tendons as well. So now let's talk about some of the different compounds, some of the pathways, and then we're going to go into the literature a little bit to clarify some of these claims. So number one, we're going to start with ghk-cu or GHK copper, one of the things we've highlighted on this channel, along with BPC 157, TB 500, KPV, which I'm going to do a deep dive in probably later in the week or next week, human growth hormone, obviously, or things like a CLO blend, which is really just a combination of all four of these minus the GH. Mostly because I don't think you could put GH in there with everything else without the GH denurturing. So we have mechanisms of angiogenesis. We're creating new nutrient deliveries or new veins to form within the body so that you can have additional nutrient deliveries to things like the tendons. We can upregulate collagen synthesis, provided that you're getting stimulus. What's really interesting, particularly as it relates to BPC 157, KPV, and TB 500, is you can also downregulate TNFA and some of the inflammation signals, which basically create more space for the collagen synthesis to onset more quickly. This was something that I've been learning more about, which is really interesting. So, and we're going to go into a diagram later, but basically you do need an inflammatory response to create changes to the extracellular matrix within the tendon. But as soon as that signal is sent, the faster you can get rid of some of the TNFA and some of the antioxidants or some of the oxidative stress, you can quickly catalyze the collagen synthesis better with the anti-inflammatories than you could without. That's interesting to me. Obviously, the angiogenesis can increase nutrient delivery to the tendons. Growth hormone could potentially increase hyperplasia or the increase in new cell formations either in the tendons directly. We're going to talk about that soon as well. And also, when you have the combination of the hyperplasia, the angiogenesis, and some of the down-regulating of the TNFA and getting rid of some of the oxidative stress, you can have expedited recovery both in the tendon and also in the skin. So I know I've just said a whole lot of science-y words. Let's start breaking this down with a little bit more imagery that I think will help. So I'm also going to link to all of these studies in the description box below. But let's talk about skin remodeling and also some of the tendon remodeling as well. So in the skin remodeling, let's say you get a flapper, you're going to have some level of wound, then scabbing, then you're going to have some proliferation of new formations, either with so assuming that you're medicating with KPV or ghk-cu, you're going to have a scab, then you're going to have a proliferation of new cells and new skin, then you're going to have remodeling. How does that play out with GHK and KPV? Well, with GHK, you're going to reduce the TNFA, the IL-1B, and the IL-6, and reduce the the inflammatory cytokines and decrease the oxidative stress, which makes it easier to have additional collagen synthesis happening within the fibroblast. Then you're going to use the angiogenesis, either from GHK, which also drives angiogenesis, or a BPC-157 or a TB500, to deliver additional nutrients. And there you'll see some of the fibroblasts proliferating thanks to the additional nutrient delivery. Then you're also going to get increased growth factors from your VGF, your EGF, or your BFGF. Then lastly, you have collagen turnover within the extracellular matrix. So that could be turning over your collagen from type 3 to type 1, getting rid of your scar tissue, and ultimately remodeling, in this case, the skin, but also potentially the tendon, which we're going to go over in the next diagram. Then you have the KPV as an additional mechanism of reducing the anti-inflammatory cytokines. And by the way, guys, KPV can do this, TB500 can do this, BPC-157 can do this. They all work in conjunction together to do the same thing, to accelerate collagen synthesis, either in the skin or in the tendons. Also, it's going to be accelerating the damaged tissue, and once the recovered capillaries will end up closing wounds faster. And that's true with just KPV. That's true with GHK. That's true with TB500 and with BPC-157. The same thing happens within the tendon itself. You can basically have a normal resting tendon, hit it with some micro tears with acute load. Then you're going to have, which is going to be your inflammation signal. Then you're going to start having, within your adaptation, you're going to be proliferating new fibroblasts, new blood vessels, new vein formation via the angiogenesis, and then you're going to have then you're going to be able to have a newly adapted tendon, and you're going to start having additional collagen turnover within the extracellular matrix, preparing it for the next event. So now let's go into me proving my case. I've shown a lot of this research before. I just want to do this in the event that this is the only video of mine that you see. This is BPC-157 increasing growth hormone expression at the fibroblast level. Sorry guys, been talking for 12 minutes. 13 minutes. This is where the bloopers come in. In general, when you include BPC-157 to growth hormone, the expression tends to increase by about 50%. Obviously, some of that is going to be happening through IGF-1, but the acceleration of new tendon development is catalyzed by the BPC-157 with the growth hormone. I wonder if you can do this essentially without running them together. I wonder if you ran BPC-157, if that would increase the growth hormone expression later on down the line, or if it needs to happen in tandem. We haven't done an experiment like that. I would love to see one, but yeah, hopefully if we get more regulatory clarity on BPC-157, that's a thing that we can do. Next up, obviously growth hormone on its own is going to increase collagen expression by 2.3-fold to 5.8-fold. By the way, this is, I believe, 6 IU's worth of growth hormone, or it's either 6 or 3 to 4. It's one of the two. Should have found that. As far as ghk copper, also stimulating type 1 collagen synthesis. That's going to be both within the tendon and within the skin. Is that the end of the slide? Yeah, I guess so. And then we can also have things like TB500, which again is known to be an anti-inflammatory, as well as KPV, limiting or actually acting as one of the mechanisms of reducing the oxidative stress from the TNFA. So with all of that said, you have basically your anabolics that can go ahead and increase the level of stimulus to the end or to the actual muscles itself, not just obviously to the forearms, but systemically. Your quads are going to grow, your calves are going to grow, your back is going to grow, your chest is going to grow, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can take that increased stimulus from the muscle and then translate that into the tendons themselves for additional finger strength. Can you do things to increase either the tendons on their own or the muscle on their own? Yeah, of course you can. If you are someone that has incredibly strong tendons and you need increased strength, you can obviously go the anabolic route. On the other hand, if you're incredibly strong and you're getting a little bit brittle, you can obviously go the peptide route, whether it's solo GH, whether it's solo ghk copper. If you're bold enough to start mixing some of these compounds together and you're not worried about some of the cancer risks, both from the increases in IGF-1 as well as the VGEF and angiogenesis, those are options to you. But realistically, folks have used growth hormone for decades at a clip, and assuming you don't have cancer, you're fine. We cannot say for certain that that's a thing that we can do for injectable ghk copper, although people use topical ghk copper for years at a clip, no problem, and that's really well documented. As far as for injectable TB500 or BPC-157 or KPV, we don't have long-term safety data. We don't. Hopefully we'll start to get some soon. If you are bold enough to want to run that, that is an option that is available to you. However, I still rest in the camp that I try not to use BPC-157 or TB500 unless I'm trying to heal a chronic injury or an acute injury. That said, I would feel comfortable using things like GH, KPV, and ghk copper on a more continuous basis. And, my opinion on steroids, as long as your blood work is manageable, play on, playa. As far as growth hormone, realistically speaking, I just don't like taking it. I think after I am done with Rainbow Rocket, I won't run GH again. But, I'm probably going to run GH again starting in the next week or two, just because that's on the list of goals and finger strength needs to go burr. So that's what we're going to do. Anyways, I know that I've now been speaking for right around 18 minutes. Hopefully this has shedded some clarity in terms of the interplay between anabolics, tendons, muscles, peptides, and how everything can synergize together. I am of the belief that there is a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario, both because the growth hormone and the IGF-1 increases both the collagen synthesis and the ability for nutrient absorption within the muscles. In general, while you could go with a peptide-only protocol, I obviously feel really strongly that test plus everything else is the way to go. But yeah, hopefully this will be illuminating into how the two of these guys play together. If you want things along the lines of dosing and other protocols, I have other videos for each of these compounds specifically that I would encourage you to check out. I will have links to them at the end of this video. But yeah, with that said, I am Adam with Anabolic Climbing. As always, wishing you guys good luck, happy learning, happy sending. Appreciate you guys immensely, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.